There is a part of him you have never touched. Not because you didn't try, not because you weren't patient enough, but because he hides it, even from himself. You feel it in the silence that appears after laughter, in the way his eyes leave yours when things get emotional, in the strange distance that shows up right when you feel close. You sense it. Something unspoken, unfinished, unresolved. And sometimes you ask yourself a quiet question late at night. What is he really hiding from me? This is not about secrets. It's not about cheating or lies or betrayal in the obvious sense. This is about his shadow, the part of him he learned to bury long before he ever met you. The part that learned survival instead of intimacy. The part that learned control instead of vulnerability. And today, we are going to look directly at that shadow, not to blame him, not to diagnose him, but to understand why love feels confusing when his shadow is in the room. Context, problem, setup, the hidden inner world. Carl Jung once said, "Till you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most men don't grow up learning how to feel. They grow up learning how to function. Be strong. Don't cry. Don't need too much. Don't depend. Don't be weak. So what happens to the emotions that don't fit that image? They don't disappear. They go underground. They form a shadow self, a hidden inner world made of unmet needs, suppressed fear, unexpressed grief, and unprocessed shame. When you meet him, you don't meet this shadow right away. You meet his persona, the mask he learned to wear to survive. He might appear confident, calm, funny, protective, emotionally controlled. But beneath that surface, there is often a silent struggle. Because intimacy doesn't just ask him to love you, it asks him to face everything he avoided becoming. And that is terrifying. So instead of saying, "I'm scared of being seen," he says, "I just need space." Instead of saying, "I don't know how to feel safe emotionally," he says, "You're overthinking." Instead of saying, "I'm afraid you'll see how broken I feel inside," he says nothing at all. And that silence becomes the space where you begin to doubt yourself. Conflict. Turning point. When love touches the shadow. Here is where things become painful. Because love, real love, doesn't just comfort the ego, it activates the shadow. The closer you get to him emotionally, the more pressure builds inside him. Not because of you, but because closeness threatens the walls he built to survive. You might notice patterns like he opens up briefly, then pulls away. He becomes distant right after emotional moments. He avoids deep conversations or changes the subject. He shuts down during conflict instead of engaging. He becomes defensive when you express needs. This is not indifference. This is internal conflict. Inside him, two forces are fighting. One, the part of him that wants connection. Two, the part of him that learned connection equals danger. So when you say, "I want to feel closer to you," what he hears is, you might lose control. When you say, "I need reassurance," what he feels is, "I might fail." When you say, "Talk to me," his nervous system hears, "Expose yourself," and exposure is what his shadow fears most. Core lessons. Principles 1. The shadow of the wounded boy. Inside many men's lives a wounded inner boy. This boy learned early that emotional expression was unsafe, ignored, or punished. Maybe he was told to man up. Maybe his emotions were minimized. Maybe vulnerability led to shame or rejection. Maybe he had to grow up too fast. So he adapted. He became self-reliant, emotionally contained, detached when necessary. But that boy never healed. He just went quiet. And when you ask him for emotional presence, you are unknowingly speaking to a wound that never learned how to respond. Story. A woman once described her partner as loving but unreachable. He showed up physically. He provided stability, but emotionally, he disappeared whenever things became real. Later, she learned that as a child, his feelings were always dismissed. Crying meant weakness. Needing comfort meant burden. So his shadow wasn't cruelty. It was emotional self-protection. 2. The masculine shadow of control. The masculine psyche often hides pain behind control. Control over emotions, control over situations, control over vulnerability. Because if he can control the environment, he doesn't have to feel what's inside. But love cannot be controlled. Love requires surrender. And surrender feels like danger to a man whose shadow equates vulnerability with loss. So he may avoid defining the relationship, resist emotional labels, keep things ambiguous, withdraw when attachment deepens. Not because he doesn't care, but because caring threatens his internal balance. His shadow whispers, if you feel too much, you will lose yourself. 3. The shadow of unexpressed shame. Shame is one of the deepest shadows men carry. Not shame for what they did, but shame for who they feel they are. I'm not enough. I don't know how to love properly. I will disappoint you. I will fail emotionally. Instead of admitting this fear, he distances himself, because distance feels safer than being exposed as inadequate. Story. A man once said, I leave before she realizes I'm not what she needs. That is the shadow speaking. Not arrogance, not selfishness, fear. 4. Projection. When his shadow becomes your pain. Unintegrated shadows don't stay hidden. They leak. They project. So instead of saying, I'm afraid of intimacy, he might say, you're too emotional. Instead of saying, I feel overwhelmed, he might say, you're asking for too much. And slowly, you begin to carry his unprocessed emotions. You start shrinking, over-explaining, waiting, hoping. This is how someone else's shadow becomes your exhaustion. 5. The anima, his relationship to the feminine. In Jungian psychology, the anima represents a man's inner feminine, his emotional depth, intuition, sensitivity, and relational capacity. If his anima is wounded or rejected, he struggles with emotional intimacy with women. He may admire femininity, but fear emotional closeness, desire connection, but resist emotional responsibility. Until he integrates his anima, relationships will feel confusing and inconsistent. Integration/application. What this means for you now comes the most important part. Understanding his shadow does not mean excusing emotional absence. It does not mean sacrificing your needs. It means seeing clearly. You cannot heal his shadow for him. You cannot love him into awareness. You cannot wait someone into emotional maturity. But you can do 3 powerful things. 1. Stop personalizing his withdrawal. His distance is about his internal world, not your worth. 2. Name what you need without chasing. Speak your truth calmly. Let his response show you his capacity. 3. Choose reciprocity over potential. Love is not about who he could become. It's about who he is willing to face himself. If he chooses awareness, growth, and emotional responsibility, his shadow can transform into depth. If he doesn't, no amount of patience will replace integration. Closing thought. The shadow he hides from you is often the part of himself he was never taught to love. But remember this, you are not here to disappear into someone else's darkness. You are here to be met, fully, emotionally, consciously. And the right connection won't ask you to wait in the shadows while someone else avoids the light. Sometimes the deepest truth is simple. Love grows where awareness lives, and where the shadow is faced, not hidden. And now, you know what you're really feeling, because you saw it.